I think this has been a big problem with movies for a long time. I think Deadpool is a great movie that's ironic and it breaks the fourth wall and it's funny. I think the problem, though, is that a lot of things try to be like Deadpool, but most actors don't have the charisma of Ryan Reynolds or Hugh Jackman, so it just doesn't really work.
I am a god, you dull creature, and I will not be bullied by that.
This is a scene from Joss Whedon's The Avengers.
Yeah.
You've probably seen it before. In fact, you've probably laughed at it before.
I did.
I know I did back in 2012, along with every single other person in the entire cinema. And realistically, how could we not? It was such a surprise, such a hilarious subversion of the classic villain monologue. I mean, think about it. It's literally the filmmakers
2012. I gotta lay down.
is picking up all the serious tropes we've become accustomed to over the past 100 years, and saying to the audience,
Look how good the CGI used to be, man. Look how good this shit was. How the fuck was it so... It was so good.
to the audience, hey, you and I have both seen this scene thousands of times before, right? We both know what you've come to expect from this stuff, so how about we just throw this formula around like a rag doll and try something new? And in the moment, this seems like a really exciting proposition. I mean, come on, an era where stories are sentient? An era where movies know they are movies and which can therefore create this new age relationship between storyteller and audience. One which is interactive and two-sided, which knows our expectations and therefore knows how to play with and subvert them. What could possibly go wrong?
I think that the example with Loki is probably one of the worst examples, in my opinion, because Loki is a trickster, and in a lot of ways he adds a lot of brevity to the story, and I think it does make sense. And also, it's a superhero movie. But the other ones I agree with.
Well, it turns out a few things. Lots of things, actually. Let me start by revisiting a story I briefly told in my recent video
I've seen this one.
on Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy, and why they remain virtually untouchable 20 years on. For some reason, I missed out on these movies throughout my childhood. I don't know why. It just never occurred to me that I should watch them. So by the time I did eventually sit down to view the trilogy, I think I was 17, and by then was very much accustomed to the cynical, self-aware, ironic style of storytelling which had grown.
By the way, this movie was an S-tier movie. 21 Jump Street, fucking insanely good. Such a great movie. Actually amazing.
Throughout the 2010s
I never
to dominate
knew
movies,
Channing
and to a
Tatum could be
lesser
that
extent
funny.
television as well. Now, to this day, I'm pretty ashamed by what I'm about to tell you, but anyway. Fellowship of the Ring begins, we hear Cate Blanchett's narration, and I'm thinking, okay, this is pretty cool. It's a bit overly serious, but whatever. And we get to the bit with Sauron, and we see this villain who kind of looks like he's from Power Rangers, and Galadriel is talking about a place called Mount Doom. So obviously, I brace myself for the joke, for the moment where this ridiculous tension is broken.
It's weird how, like, obviously this guy's a bit younger, right? So, like, he grew up with movies like this, whereas, like, for me, like, Lord of the Rings was the norm. You know, like, then there was Gladiator, and, like, you know, we grew up watching Spartacus and, you know, the Ten Commandments and Lawrence of Arabia. You know, like, and we also, by the way, we had movies like 300. Well, 300 was 2006 or 7, I think, right? That was a bit later. Like 13th Warrior, Braveheart. Like, we had movies like, for example, like a really great example of a older movie that has like that same type of storytelling is Indiana Jones. Indiana Jones definitely had the same type of like self-awareness that like people can sometimes criticize new movies for. But again, do you know what the new movies don't have? They don't have the charisma of Harrison Ford. Troy. Yeah, bro, Troy. Exactly. Like there's no joke after fucking Achilles just kills, was it Hector of Troy, in front of fucking everybody, drags his corpse around, and he says, fuck y'all, I'm out. I'll be back and kill everybody else later. That was it, right? It wasn't like he tripped on the way out and it's like, haha, funny. No, bro, like he just killed him and that was it. Yeah, the Mummy. Yeah, the Mummy was like that too. Yeah, they had a lot of like the comedy and shit like that too.
And it just doesn't come. So I think, fine, that was the prologue, whatever. You can't really make jokes in the prologue. Then we get the whole Shire sequence, and I
but
see
it's
all
weird
the...
to see like a younger person watching these movies that's not familiar with the way the storytelling used to be. It's really interesting to see this perspective. I haven't heard this before.
These little guys running around the place, smoking weed and making these weird faces. It all feels rather camp, rather silly, especially once the wizard in the pointy hat arrives. And so once again, I brace myself for the self-referential joke, for the film to acknowledge how bizarre this all is. And once again, no such joke occurs. And this basically...
Disagreed. I think that there's a couple of points of levity here. It's the guy, you know, hobbits aren't particularly smart or, you know, like the best inventors or anything. And it's like a dumb guy picking his ear. And then like the older guy who's laughing when Gandalf sets off the fireworks and the kids are happy. And then the wife comes out and she's mad. And then he's like, oh no, I actually hate this too. Yeah, of course, honey, it's so bad. You know, like, so there actually was brevity in Lord of the Rings. It's just that it wasn't done in a way that was cringe. Most of the brevity that's done now in Hollywood movies is written by people whose worldview is, what would the world be like if everything that my parents told me was actually wrong? It feels like almost bratty in a way.
No such joke occurs. And this basically happens for the entire trilogy. Like, you think I would have gotten used to the tone after a few scenes, but no. My brain had been so molded over time by so much postmodern wink.
Nobody tosses a dwarf. And my axe and then Gimli's axe just fucking breaks. Gimli absolutely had a lot of comic relief moments. And then fucking Merry and Pippin. Absolutely comic relief. Yeah, there were a lot of that. The problem isn't that there's comic relief. It's there's the authenticity and purity of the relief that doesn't feel like it's fake. Well, second breakfast? Yeah, exactly. And then Aragorn throws him the app. Yeah, there you go. There's so many examples of it. It's just done in a way that's sincere and authentic. Which is, again, to be fair, what the video is about. It's about sincerity and not jokes. But I feel like, again, a lot of times these two things get conflated. Sorry, I'm pausing a lot. Lord of the Rings is my favorite movie series. I have to fucking... Okay, let me move on.
Wink, nudge, nudge storytelling. That it could just not recognize sincerity. Now, let's actually stop for a second and think about how crazy that is. Because sincerity is not some outlandish storytelling device, only used by those daring few writers and directors. No, sincerity, since the dawn of time, has been the very essence of storytelling itself. Like, imagine having this conversation with someone even 50 years ago. They probably wouldn't even
This shit came out in, like, 2002. Can you believe this? This is the second movie? Like... And still, nobody can even come close to this? I actually think it's the way they record film nowadays. I'm actually a believer that I think, like, the old school film grain is a better cinematic quality than what they do nowadays.
Understand what you were talking about. For millennia, stories were told to convey truths, to share human experiences, to evoke genuine emotion. From ancient myths and legends, to classic literature, to television and cinema. Sincerity has been the core element that binds the audience to the narrative. It's the fundamental ingredient that allows us to resonate so deeply with stories. Sincerity is what makes characters relatable, struggles compelling, and triumphs uplifting. Now look, I'm not saying that every story has to be this serious thing which dramatically changes our lives. There is absolutely a place for humor, for irony, for stories that
this was, dude, Hot Fuzz was absolutely an ironic, really funny movie. I love this movie.
take themselves too seriously, for movies which know they are movies
Yeah.
and have fun with that premise. In fact, this kind of storytelling can be incredibly refreshing and entertaining when done right. However, when this becomes the default, when every film in the cinema feels the need to follow trend by shying away
Yeah.
from earnest emotions or genuine stakes, a lot of problems tend to arise. Problems which films with a more sincere approach would just
Yeah, bro, like this scene, this shit was so real. Like, I remember watching this in a movie theater, and I was like, what the fuck? Bro, like, because, like, you gotta remember, because I was a little kid, right? And so, like, I'm like, oh man, the wizard died. That's so sad. That's awful, right? And then you find out he comes back. This dude leveled up. He fought the demon. He fucking killed it. Resurrected by God. And now he's back. Holy shit.
ever run into. First of all, that amazing thrill of having your expectations subverted, that rush of excitement you get when a movie is meta, self-aware, ironic, well, it has extremely diminishing returns. Like I said earlier, everyone in the movie theater laughed back in 2012 when Hulk picked up Loki and threw him around like a ragdoll. But I imagine if you watched that scene today, it just wouldn't be that funny. But why?
Well, yeah, because we already saw it before. Well, the reason, I don't know. I don't think really the reason for that is anything other than the fact that we already have seen it, and the joke was the abruptness of it. And so because we're already knowing that it's going to happen, it's not funny. You know, like that's the reason why.
Well, first of all, the joke has been done a million times since, in both every Marvel movie and basically everywhere else. But on top of this, every single one of these self-referential jokes are essentially the same, just with slightly different coats of paint.
I gotta do it. Even though I agree a lot with this video. We always had this.
Like, sure, you can subvert expectations, break the fourth wall, play on pre-established tropes in as many different ways.
You want to hear a really good example of one when it was good? And this, by the way, was the best episode of this entire season. This episode went so fucking hard, and one of the reasons why is because of the fact that it was 100% sincere. This was so fucking good. Like, I know everybody makes fun of Game of Thrones for being bad, but even in the later seasons, they had, like, huge W's. It was really only season 8 that I think really sucked. There we go.
Been a long time.
And, like, you see this guy looks like a fucking badass, right? Look at this guy. Fucking Skeletor.
Last time I saw you, the little crow was your prisoner. The other way around now. What happened?
War.
War. You call that a war? The greatest army the North has ever seen, cut to pieces by some southern king.
We should gather the elders. Find somewhere quiet to talk.
Trying to reason it out.
Give the orders here.
I'm not giving an order.
Why aren't you in chains?
He's not my prisoner.
No? What is he?
We're allies.
You fucking traitor.
Uh-oh.
You fight for the crows now?
Uh-oh.
I don't fight for the crows.
And he's still trying to be reasonable.
We're not here to fight. We're here to talk.
He's just trying to talk
Is
about
that right? You and the pretty crow do a lot of talking, Torment.
Oh.
And when you're done talking, do you get down on your knees and suck his cock?
And it's not like it's one hit either.
Gather the elders, and let's talk.
That's it. That's it. That was fucking badass. And so, like, there are instances where you have that sincerity, and, like, you have the same thing that's kind of like Loki getting thrown around. But it's just that some of the movies just don't have, I don't think they have, like, the writing ability for it. I think the difference is not the style of storytelling, it's in the quality of it. You're right. Yeah, it's the quality, because the guy that plays Tormund is fucking amazing.
As you like. But let's face it, the joke is pretty much this. Hey, you're watching a film, and we know it. Like, that's it. That's the whole joke, done over and over and over again. And a huge problem with this formula, other than it becoming stale very quickly due to ridiculous overexposure, and it not being that clever or funny in the first place, is that it makes what is supposed to be unpredictable and subversive, predictable, and boring. And in my opinion, the single best example of this is Thor Ragnarok, a film which I personally find to be rather overrated. Now, don't get me wrong.
I love this movie. I think this movie's great. It's one of my favorite Marvel movies. I do. I think it's such a great movie.
Like every single line or joke in Thor Ragnarok is some meta-ironic quip which winks at the audience. But a lot of them are, and they're so frequent that it doesn't take long for you to predict when they're coming. Again, because they're essentially all the same joke. Like, the movie starts with yet another villain monologue, and we have this joke where Thor slowly spins away from the villain, and yeah, it makes your nose exhale slightly, maybe.
I think that we have to keep in mind that with Thor Ragnarok in particular, this is a superhero movie, and there are two average age groups that this is being targeted towards. 38-year-old men and their 12-year-old sons. It's a comic book movie. It is a comedic comic book movie. It's not supposed to be Lord of the Rings.
And then the film gets back to the villain monologue and you think, alright, well, let's hear what the guy has to say. And then they just do the exact same joke again, like 10 seconds later. And you just think, what's even the point of this? If you're just going to pull the rug out from under me every single time, I'm going to very quickly pick up on what you're doing and learn when to jump over said rug. Does that metaphor make sense? Like,
I can see what his point is, and I think actually... Well, like, and you can compare that with, like, the movie after that, Love and Thunder, right? That movie should have been way better. It really should have been, but I just don't think it was written well. Like, I just... Yeah, I loved it. The one sucked. Yeah, but, like, it shouldn't have sucked. It didn't deserve to suck. It deserved to be very good.
That made this tone somewhat work in the beginning is that it was surprising and unpredictable, but I'm afraid to say that that ship sailed long ago, leaving us with... well, what exactly? To be honest with you, I'm not really sure, but whatever it is, it feels quite nasty, you know? Like a trick is being played on us, like we're being gaslit by someone who doesn't really respect the audience, nor the material they're responsible for.
True, so true, so true, true.
Which is kind of surreal to say out loud, but that's where we now find ourselves. Like, there's this one film which I'm sure no one's ever heard of before called The Last Jedi. I think it's the 8th episode of this epic space opera saga thing, and there's this one joke in it where we see this huge ship landing, and the cinematography and the music seem to be leading us to some big reveal. And then it turns out to be an iron. Like, it's an iron. Ironing some... clothes. Now look, I can actually see how someone could find this moment kind of witty, and look, I'm not gonna argue against that. However, I would argue that the brief laugh this moment may perhaps offer is nowhere near worth what it takes away. Because this joke basically feels like the creators of The Last Jedi, whoever they may be, making fun of us and punishing us for taking any of this seriously. It almost feels...
I think that kind of makes sense, but, like, you have a character like Chewbacca, right? Who, like, clearly Chewbacca is the comic relief for the old movies, you know? Like, he was, and there were funny jokes in Star Wars. Yeah, R2-D2, yeah, Jar Jar, well, he was too much, right? Like, he was way too much. But yeah, C-3PO, R2-D2, yeah, and so, like, you had comic relief before in the past. I think the problem is that the story just sucked and it was told in a bad way. Like, I even agree with, like, Snoke being, like, nothing. It was like it was played out to be, like, this really big thing and it was nothing. I actually think that was a cool plot twist. It just wasn't capitalized on in a good way.
Feels nihilistic. In fact, no, what am I talking about? It is nihilistic. A moment like this wouldn't feel out of place in Spaceballs. You know, the film that was made to take the piss out of Star Wars.
Yeah.
And now it's appearing in the real thing. Like, this is the point we've arrived at. There's a great video essay you should watch by The Closer Look about The Last Jedi's comedy, and in it they continuously bring up this word, bathos, which basically means an anticlimax created by a lapse in mood from the sublime to the trivial or ridiculous.
Yeah, this is exactly, so fucking true. It's like you have a, like, no story nowadays can have a serious moment because everything has to be offset by a stupid joke or like some sort of, funny aside. That's exactly, I completely agree with this.
It's a film presenting us with something that could potentially be rather emotional or epic or dramatic, before pulling it away at the last second and going, "Wee, we got you. You thought it was going to be serious, but we were one step ahead of you." If this sounds familiar, it's because it's basically appeared in every single modern blockbuster created within the Hollywood system. And it is this type of joke which I believe to have caused the single greatest problem of this entire meta-ironic era which Hollywood currently finds itself in. You know what I was saying earlier about how...
This one might just be... we had a guy that did this. We know, there's a guy that did this. All 45, yeah. All Donald, yeah.
Which Hollywood currently finds itself in.
Presidential,
you know what I was saying earlier about how sincerity is the core element which binds audiences to stories? The fundamental ingredient that allows us to resonate so deeply with cinema? Well, then it would make sense that insincerity achieves the opposite, creating a barrier between the audience and the story that they're watching. It's funny, really, because a movie acknowledging that it's a movie is usually referred to as breaking the fourth wall. Yet, I would argue that a better term would be strengthening or refortifying the fourth wall. And the more frequently this wall is acknowledged, the more sturdy and opaque this barrier between audience and film becomes.
Well, and there's instances of, like, for example, like, maybe I'm pausing or talking about this too much, right? But, like, this issue of, like, this guy, her thinking that she's got something. I think this was it. I think this is it, right?
He was wise to use you against me.
And she got a lightsaber. He don't even have the lightsaber out. He didn't give a fuck. The spin is dumb. Yeah, I think this was cool. I do. I thought this was fucking cool. Sorry to say. And then there's the other one.
I am so very sorry.
Yeah, here we go. This is so good.
That doesn't look good.
It isn't. It's him.
I think dialogue like that is the great example. Like, that scene, that dialogue didn't need to happen. And it's stupid. Like, I actually think that's the example of the stupid dialogue that dials things down. That's the cringe shit. So, like, she's training the white guy, Cal Kestis.
You have failed me, Inquisitor.
Avengers!
Watch this.
No!
There it is. It's done. You know, oops, get the fuck out of here. And this is, by the way, this is the, yeah, she trained him. Yeah. Yeah, not going too well. No need to over-explain things, exactly. The Rogue One was good, yeah. And so it's like, there's elements of it being done well, but I actually think that, you guys see what I'm saying, though, about, like, the dialogue of that doesn't look good? It's like, okay. Yeah, fucking obviously, that's Darth Vader. Of course it's not good. It's like the self-awareness. I ruined the mode. It's just, I think it's just, I don't even know.
The opposite, creating a barrier between the audience and the story that they're watching. It's funny, really, because a movie acknowledging that it's a movie is usually referred to as breaking the fourth wall. Yet, I would argue that a better term would be strengthening or refortifying the fourth wall. And the more frequently this wall is acknowledged, the more sturdy and opaque this barrier between audience and film becomes, the more we all come to expect this ironic style of storytelling, the less we are going to want to emotionally invest in films in the first place. Because what's the point if every movie is just going to make fun of itself, make fun of you for ever thinking that it might take something seriously? This is why—
Yeah, I will acknowledge this for every movie series except for Deadpool, because Deadpool was built off of that, and that's why it's funny. But everything else, yes. Like, that's like that's part of the, that's like the appeal of it.
my initial reaction to The Lord of the Rings was one of confusion, because I was so used to films like these gaslighting me and making fun of me and making fun of themselves and consistently avoiding actual stakes or real emotions. When I was eventually met with Sincerity from a major studio blockbuster, I thought this must be some sort of trick. I'm not going to offer up my heart to this trilogy, to this experience, because— well, I've been hurt so many times in the past, and I know how this goes. The second I get invested in any of this, some hobbit is going to come out of a bush, smoking his pipe, and laugh at me for taking any of this seriously. And that, my friends, should just not be happening. Like, that is such an unnatural—
That's what I'm concerned they're going to do with Tom Bombadil in Season 2 of the Rings of Power.
Response to a piece of art. So, what is the solution to all of this? Because like I've already said, it's not that I think that this meta sort of humour doesn't have any place in modern cinema. Well, I have a few ideas. First of all, I don't really think movies can have their cake and eat it too when it comes to this stuff. Like, I find it so bizarre when the Deadpool movies, for example, which, let's be honest, essentially exist to make fun of superhero films, to break the fourth wall, and to have Ryan Reynolds make a ton of dick jokes. I find it so bizarre—
I think they're fucking great. I love these movies. I think they're so funny. I do. I think they're just like, and this is the thing, is I think that people have like a degree of snobbery around like superhero films. And I don't share that at all. Obviously, my favorite superhero is Batman, and my favorite series of that is the Dark Knight trilogy. However, I think Infinity War is an S-tier movie. I think that Thor Ragnarok is an S-tier movie. I think that there are superhero movies that are fucking amazing. Because whenever I go to McDonald's, I don't expect to get a $300 steak. I'm there for a nugget and maybe a cute little funny toy and a drink. The Watchmen. Yeah, exactly. Infinity War is cinema. Yeah, and I think Infinity War had like moments of brevity, but there really weren't that many. I think that's actually why it was so good. Like, Infinity War to me, like, it was Infinity War and I think it was The Winter Soldier. They felt like way more serious
when even those movies are suddenly trying to form some sort of emotional connection. Like, no. Any attempt at sincerity feels so out of place when you've spent the entire runtime taking absolutely nothing seriously. Another Hollywood franchise which I think has sadly run into this problem is the Fast and Furious films. Now look, I know these movies...
This has become anime for... This is redneck... Fast and the Furious has become redneck anime. I think that at this point, they've just embraced it. This is just the way it is.
And most of the other movies I've spoken about in this video are not exactly the pinnacle of cinema, but I do think that the Fast and Furious series is a pretty interesting case study when it comes to...
the first Fast and Furious... Dude, we watched all, like, the first 4 or 5 of these movies. These movies used to go so hard. They were awesome.
To a franchise gaining self-consciousness, if you will, halfway through its lifespan.
I think my dad and I watched Tokyo
This
Drift
series
in
began
theaters.
in the early 2000s as your standard illegal street racing Point Break ripoff. However, the series, in my opinion, did not hit its peak until its 5th installment, which came out in 2011, 1 year before Joss Whedon changed everything with the Avengers. Fast 5, for me, is not just the zenith of this franchise, but honestly, one of the best dumb action movies of the 21st century.
Exactly.
Why? Well, because Fast and Furious was not yet this huge meme. The creators were not yet in on the joke. Yes, this film is stupid, but it also takes itself pretty seriously. The thing moves at a great pace, the set pieces are explosive and well directed, the characters are likable.
He's really cooking here. He's totally right. Yeah, this is absolutely.
But most importantly, it's earnest. It's not trying to make fun of itself. And because of this, it's actually rather wholesome. You find yourself really buying into all the vehicular masculine poetry in a way you probably just wouldn't ever expect to. And then the mid-2010s happened. The Fast and Furious franchise became aware of its own existence, of its own legend, of its own meme. The creators got in on the joke, and it lost what made it special in the first place. It became a parody of itself. And yeah, that kind of thing has happened before.
Well, I think that there's like in on the joke. So like, here's a great example of a series that's kind of like in on the joke in a way, like where there's a degree of self-awareness, but the self-awareness doesn't take away from the content, is in the Witcher series. They have the scene from like Geralt in the bath from the beginning of Witcher 3. Like, this is very obviously for the people that watched that watching the show that have played the games, right? But it's done by somebody, and hey, again, isn't it interesting that the commonality here is the guy that really cares and respects the source material and wants to take it seriously and honestly? There it is.
But they still try to do the emotional stuff, and it just doesn't work. It doesn't land because you can't really have it both ways.
That's a good point.
Or should I say, it's very difficult to have it both ways. I do think that on the rare occasion, when executed properly, you can have like one self-aware joke in your film. One instance where your movie recognizes that it's a movie, the audience laughs, and then...
The Big Lebowski was definitely self-aware. Where's the money, Lebowski? And they drop a ferret in his... Like, it was 100% self-aware. Absolutely. And like, so was, I mean, fuck. Pulp Fiction was built around a MacGuffin.
We move on from it. A great example of this, sticking to the whole villain monologue thing,
Never
is
watched
this
this
moment from The Incredibles.
You sly dog! You got me monologuing! I can't...
Now, this isn't the deepest, most meta...
It's a movie for kids.
...joke ever told before, but it is funny. Why? Well, one, because it's really not that self-referential, like, let's be real, this is a pretty innocent joke. And two, the rest of The Incredibles is sincere. Sure, it has jokes, of course, it's a Pixar movie, but nothing too self-aware, nothing which takes you out of the experience, which stops you from emotionally investing into the stakes of the story. So again, I do think that you can include the odd meta joke in your movie if you really want to, but it needs to be handled incredibly delicately. Of course, what's probably easier than this is to just go full Charlie Kaufman and completely embrace the art.
Well, it's also like, it's like tongue-in-cheek humor that's not insulting to the intelligence of the reader. Like, for example, I think somebody asked Joseph Joestar, what happened to your hand? And he says, oh, I lost it in a car's accident. And to somebody who doesn't know, they're like, oh shit, okay. But somebody who does know, they're like, good one. Yeah.
Of meta storytelling, or go full Tarantino and wholeheartedly embrace the art of homage. And I have indeed had tons of fun with films like these, but if you're not willing to go all the way with this stuff, perhaps just stick to the original source of storytelling.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Pure, unfiltered sincerity.
Settle down.
This doesn't mean abandoning humor altogether, but rather ensuring that it serves to enhance the emotional depth and authenticity of the narrative, rather than detracting from it. Fortunately for us, there does seem to be a growing trend in Hollywood at the moment that seems to signal a return to this sincere approach.
I think
Movies
so, too.
like Top Gun Maverick and Dune Part 2 have demonstrated that studios are once again down to...
Yeah, I watched Dune Part 1. I watched it on a flight somewhere. I was flying to California, and I watched the first movie. Man, they really could have cut that down by like an hour. Like, really, like, that's crazy that it was that long. Like, that was a long movie. Like, it didn't need to be that long. But it was a good movie. It's like once you take a step back and you stop thinking about how long the movie is. And like, this is, remember what I said this with like Dragon's Dogma 2 and like Dragon's Dogma 1? Is like the moment that you stop trying to beat the game and you stop trying to like I had this happen with Freerun as well, right? Is like I stopped thinking about, well, I want to hear what happens at the end of the movie. What happens whenever they get to this place? What happens whenever they get there? What happens when this, right? And you just take a step back and you enjoy the journey. I think that Dune was an incredible movie. But man, they spent a lot of fucking time doing zoom-ins on shit that didn't really have anything to do with anything else, right? Like, man, that really was a lot of time they spent on that. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of time. It's an artistic mood piece. It is. But you got it. What I'm saying is like, and I think that's why Dune was good. That's why it was well received. Is because it was done so brazenly that it takes the, like, it takes the watcher outside of the traditional movie mindset, and it like allows them to actually like, It allows them to basically like surrender themselves to just simply watching the movie rather than trying to like kind of go along, move forward. It's experience, right? Yeah, they're in it. Becomes a spectacle and not just a story. Yeah, exactly.
Craft narratives that are earnest and emotionally resonant. And I think the audience response to both of those films says a lot about what we truly want from this beautiful medium deep down. Perhaps we'll never get another Lord of the Rings.
No.
A series you'll be glad to hear I now love and appreciate with all my heart. But in this
we're not going to. It's not going to happen. Like, and that's fine. Like, it's fine because it did. It already happened, and so like we're so lucky to even happen once. We're lucky it even happened one time, bro.
To reclaim the forgotten currency of sincerity, we might have gotten something even better. We might just rediscover that the most epic tales are the ones that dare to be genuine, to be earnest, to embrace the sublime beauty of unfiltered truth. You're waiting for me to make a joke, aren't you?
Good one.
To relieve the tension after that emotional monologue.
You just did.
I'm not going to. Thanks for watching.
Yep, there it is. No, I mean, like, here's the way I see it, right? I think that there are a lot of instances, and like the point that I'm bringing up with like some of these other movie like kind of parallels that I've shown before, or like throughout like this video, is that there are a lot of instances where this same type of thing happened in older movies as well, and in things that we consider to be great. But the problem is that I think it's the dialogue. And I notice this a lot with Rings of Power. I was listening to the dialogue in Rings of Power, and I was thinking to myself, man, this isn't as good as Lord of the Rings. It's not as good. Like, and to be fair, right? I mean, it's, who wrote that? No, I mean, it's fine, right? But it's like, you compare this to Lord of the Rings, and it's like, it's really not as good. It's not even as close. It's not fair. It's not even fair, right? And I'm thinking of, like, games that, like, for example, Metal Gear Rising. Absolute fucking cinema. Raiden is fighting against 2 unmanned B-2 bombers, and he jumps out of the helicopter to cut them in half with a laser sword. Dude. Yeah. Fucking exactly. It was so fucking good, right? And so that's what it was about. Raiden and Metal Gear Solid 4 is nuts. Oh, I'm going to play the whole series now. Like, and I know it's nothing, it's going to be nothing like the Revengeance. I know it's going to be nothing like it, but I'm going to play the whole series now. Like, I'm totally sold. I love the aesthetic. I love the design. I love the vibe. The gameplay was fun too. It was awesome. Yeah, I don't know. Play original Metal Gear Solid. No, I'm going to start with number 1, right? Yeah, I will start with number 1. When's Witcher 3? Oh, I don't know. I think actually Witcher 3 might be an off-stream game for me. Because it seems like a game that I kind of want to just, like, sit back and enjoy. Like, and that's not like a stream thing, but, like, that's just a vibe, right? It's a vibe. Hit less hard if you don't play the first 3. Oh, no, I will. Beat Armstrong first. Yeah, I might just put it on easy mode and beat the last boss and make sure that I finish it, right? So yeah, and Witcher 3 felt so immersive for me. Yeah, and I'd want to have that experience because I had that with a few other games and I really enjoyed it a lot. I really appreciate this video, and I think this is something that needs to be talked about a lot more. I think he brings up a lot of points. When everything's ironic, nothing is. But I also think that a lot of what he's saying is not an instance with the action, it's with the implementation. Because, you know, like, we can go back and think of, like, all the movies, like, even a movie kind of like Romancing the Stone with, like, Michael Douglas in it. That movie was kind of, it was a little campy. It was clearly, you know, kind of like one of these adventure movies, etc. And they had some of the same type of jokes, throwback, yeah. But at the same time, it still did have a certain degree of sincerity and authenticity to it, right? I like that one, yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, like, you guys, I've watched a lot of movies, okay? Like, I've basically any movie that's come out before the year 2012, I've probably seen the movie. I think, again, this right here is the problem.
That doesn't look good.
It isn't.
That's what's cringe. Cut that scene out, and you have some real shit.